WOVU LP, Cleveland.
This is Open Door with Vince Robinson. In-depth conversations with people who are making a difference in the lives of others here and around the world. Culture is at the heart of who you are. Know your culture, find yourself on Open Door with Vince Robinson.
Greetings and salutations. It's Vince Robinson with another edition of Open Door. My guest today is Nicole D. Miller. She is no stranger to Open Door. She's actually been a guest before. But before I bring her to you, I just want to give you some insight on who she is. She's an author, writer, speaker, poet, and soon to be a novelist. She has a knack for intertwining her faith and culture through writing and loves depicting Black characters who are both spiritual and relevant to this generation. Her first book, How to Overcome Heartbreak, Recovering from Misguided Love, tells her personal story of healing from a breakup, while the sequel, How to Overcome Heartbreak, Stories That Heal, shares more from her, along with 10 others who have dealt with breakups. Her latest book, Stories for the Urban Soul, is a fiction compilation of short stories dealing with everyday Black characters, navigating faith and relatable life issues. She also has her ebook available on her website, NicoleDMiller.com, titled Self-Publishing 101, Everything You Need to Know from One Author to Another. And if you want to learn more, you can visit her website, blog, betterthanwine.net. Her email is NicoleDMiller1983 at Gmail, and we'll give you all the rest of her social media details as we progress in this program. So, with all of that said, welcome to Open Door, Nicole D. Miller. How are you today?
Hi, Vince. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great and doing even better now that we're able to have this conversation. You've been quite a busy person these days. What have you been up to?
Writing, creating, building, all the things.
Writing, building, and creating, and knowing you and all that abundant energy that you have. They're all good things. Met you maybe last year sometime, I think, at the at Africa House.
It probably was there. I know I've seen you there quite a few times. I know we connected last summer during Juneteenth, and it was at the cafe. I cannot remember the name right now.
Unbar Cafe. That's when we met officially. But I noticed you at Africa House during a program when I was playing live music, and we had a really nice turnout that day. And I heard you say that you had written a book, and I said, she sounds like somebody that I need to know. And lo and behold, months later, I see you at the Unbar. You have the book there, and I said, okay, well, we're gonna put you on. So that's what we did. So while we're talking about it, tell us about that great book that you wrote, and then we'll go into some of the projects that you're working on.
Sure. So the book you're referring to is Stories for the Urban Soul. It's a compilation of short stories, novellas, and poetry. Black characters dealing with everyday life issues, from heartbreak to parenting to social injustices to college life, all the things that we can relate to, but faith-based, encouraging, spiritual. So kind of like a chicken soup for the soul for Black people. So that is the book that you're referring to, and it's my first fiction book, my third book, but the other two are nonfiction, and it's near and dear to my heart. A couple of the stories intertwine, and some of those characters and venues will be popping up in future writings. So.
Okay. All right. And then you wrote a couple of books before you got to that. You want to tell us about those books?
Sure. So my very first book, How to Overcome Heartbreak, Recovering from Misguided Love, I published that in 2014. That was a story of my own experience of a breakup, how I healed, what helped me heal, and I share it to help other people in similar situations. And then the sequel is How to Overcome Heartbreak, Stories That Heal. I share more of my own journey at that point, but then I interview 7 women and 4 men, and I share more from them. So if you can't get anything out of my story, which I doubt that, I'm sure you can get something out of theirs.
Mm-hmm. That just begs the question, if I could be so curious, what did you learn about that heartbreak that allowed you to move forward?
I learned a lot. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned was not losing my identity in a relationship. So at the time, I was really young. I was in college, wet behind the ears, and a lot of young people think they know everything. I was one of those. And so I just didn't know my identity. I really lost myself in that relationship. So getting out of that, maturing and getting older, one of the things that I learned was definitely knowing who I was and not losing myself in someone else.
Mm-hmm. And you said that you interviewed some other folks. What kinds of things did they bring to the table?
They had a lot of different experiences, especially with the guys. Some of them weren't as maybe serious as mine was, like we were engaged. Some of the people were able to bounce back more quickly, but definitely the women related to me in that it did take a little longer. And, some of them actually ended up with that person. Some of them ended up with someone different. So it varied, not everyone's story was the same as mine. But I think the theme was being a healthier person. So I think everyone had in common, look, I need to become a healthier person after the situation.
Why do you think it is that it was more difficult or challenging for the women to recover than the men?
I have my own thoughts about that. I think as women, we can be more in tune. I think we can be more intuitive. And so, in some situations, not all, but in some situations, some of the guys probably were hurt deeper, but then the way that they coped with it was maybe to jump into another relationship or to maybe, make it more superficial in their mind. Sometimes they weren't as hurt, maybe just because they weren't as emotionally wired. There's a lot of reasons for that. In some cases, some of the guys were hurt more, and I can think of a few guys that I know that have been, deeply affected by heartbreak, and even I would say some of the men that I've dated. But the way we respond to that can be different for sure.
Well, it's really interesting because for whatever reason, societal reasons, there's this idea that if you're a man, you're not supposed to be emotional. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to emote because it's a signal of weakness. Can you talk about the conflict that exists in the fact that as a human being, you have to experience those emotions? So why is it such a stigma for a man to be emotional?
It does hurt my heart to hear that that men don't have that space where they can be a human being, because I'm a faith-based person and I think of the Bible, and it's like, well, Jesus wept. It's like Jesus was a man and he cried. So I don't know where that comes from, that men can't cry. I definitely agree that is some type of false, misleading concept, and it hinders our men from, feeling all of the feelings they were wired to feel. And my thought is that if you're not processing those deep traumas, those deep triggers, that pain, it's manifesting subconsciously in your life. Like you're either unconscious or subconscious that this stuff is still being worked out in you. It's just not in a healthy manner. So I definitely think it's unfortunate. I think that maybe now, as we're talking more about mental health and, we're creating that culture for there to be more safe spaces for us to have those type of dialogues, specifically even in the Black community or in urban communities. There's hope for that, but we still have a long way to go. I definitely think men need to be affirmed that it's okay to cry. You were made to cry and you have feelings for a reason.
Okay. So you wrote 2 books that dealt with your own personal experience and then those experiences of others. And then you did a pivot and then you wrote some fiction. Talk about what prompted that transition from nonfiction to fiction.
That's a really good question, Vince. It's interesting because I never knew that I was going to be a fiction writer. I did write a few short stories in 2017. I was like, oh, let me just try my hand at this. I did some workshops. I think my roommate at the time had written a short story, and I thought like, oh, I never wrote a short story before. Let me try that. But I put it down and did not pick up writing until the pandemic. So I actually did have a passing of a loved one. My mom passed away, and it was during that time of grief that I was unable to read nonfiction. I was unable to read anything heavy, anything serious. So what I did was I turned to fiction, and I started reading books as a way to escape, which is something I did growing up as a child. And so these books really met me in a place of healing and help and wholeness and all of these positive things that I was getting from these fiction stories. And when the pandemic hit, I had more time on my hands, and I was like, you know what, let me just revisit this. And what I did was I started picking up the short stories again, and I started writing the rest of the short stories that ended up being in that book. So it was out of a place of recovering from grief, and fiction was really used to help me in my healing journey. It gave me fun, it gave me creativity, and I really needed that in my grief recovery process.
That's really amazing, Nicole. I mean, I've seen the book. It's not one of those 100-page pamphlet type things. You know, it's hardbound, and it's got several pages in it. And you took that time that everybody sat out in quarantine and isolation, and then you created something beautiful. How many pages are in that book?
It's probably about 350. It's a thick book. It's pretty hefty. And the funny thing is, it was not even going to be as long, but my editor, she loved the stories and she gave me some feedback. And she said, Nicole, you really should add on to the book and share what went into your thought process behind these characters and these stories, because she and I dialogued about the stories as she was editing, and she got the insight that I really wanted the reader to get through our dialogue, and she wanted the reader to get that, and she said you should add this on. So I did. I added an extra section called Lessons from the Characters. So at the back of the book, if you flip all the pages, you'll see that each character is broken out, and I share with the reader my insight and maybe some things they didn't get while they were reading.
That's amazing. So it's not just a novel, but it's almost kind of like a workbook of sorts, because you have information that can lead to greater understanding. That's a tribute to your depth as a writer. You're listening to Open Door on 95.9 FM WOVU with Vince Robinson. My guest is author Nicole Miller. We'll be right back after this.
You gotta listen, cause you gonna miss it. 95.9, those are the digits where you find good music, good conversation, good information. Number one station, taking over Cleveland, not just for the weekend. 24/7, day into the evening, we keep on feeding you. Just keep eating solutions on the radio. That's what we be dealing. WOVU 95.9. Don't miss out, you better catch this vibe.
Welcome back to Open Door with Vince Robinson. My guest is author Nicole D. Miller. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and I'll be sharing that information with you on how you can do that. She is Nicole D. Miller at Twitter. You can find her at facebook.com /HTOHB. We were talking about that book, 300 and some odd pages, and it's got an appendix with some really great information. Talk to us about some of the stories that are in that book. You know, I know that as a writer, you know, especially when you're a novelist, you have to create dialogue. That means you have to put yourself in the headspace of two different people at one time and figure out what this person is going to say, and then figure out what the next person is going to say. I want to talk to you about your process, but I also would like to know about what some of those stories involve.
Yeah, so the book opens up with one of my favorite characters. Her name is Lisa, and she's young, about 30. She's a parent, single parent, and she's fresh off a divorce. It's been about a year. She's still pining away for her ex, and she's struggling. She's struggling. She's in a city. She doesn't have that many friends, but there's a dear older woman in her life named Sylvia who helps her with her daughter and caregiving. And so as Lisa is writing, because she's a writer, she's a journalist, and so as she's working in this cafe, and it's Black owned. It's located in New York. They're in the heart of Manhattan, and it's popping, right? So it's like where you want to be on a Friday night. And so what ends up happening is she develops an attraction to a young man who becomes a new love interest. So the really cool thing is that Lisa has a spiritual experience in the book, but it happens through these characters that she connects with. So her new love interest, her friend Sylvia is such a great mentor, and she's not hit over the head with religion. It's more of just people loving on you, and there's community there. And that's what draws her in. But the cool thing is that first story is located in a cafe and in an area that's going to be playing out in my future writing. So the very next story is her love interest story. So we meet her love interest. His name is Joe. We meet him in Lisa's story, but then the next story, we find out more about Joe. So then it goes into being a young Black man in New York in the business world, and he encounters a young man who actually was previously incarcerated. So there's an element of seeing a Black male mentoring a younger Black male, just being the standard in his community and his sphere of influence. And I kind of play into that. I love those stories because, like I said, that cafe, that location, and that venue is going to pop up in future writings. It's definitely going to pop up in the novel that I'm working on now. And there's some other characters in those stories that'll probably be spinoffs for future works. But those are the only two stories that relate. There's another story. It's young adult. Her name is Vanessa. She's going off to college. We kind of experience her coming of age. She thinks she's got it together. She has a strong household. She has an identity. She kind of knows her value, but she ends up in an abusive, toxic relationship. So we kind of see how, even though she has all of these things that seem to prepare her for life, she still has to learn some things by bumping her head. So we have another college student named Tyrone. His story is near and dear to my heart too, because after the George Floyd situation, I was inspired to write a poem, which is listed in the book. And Tyrone's story is right after the poem, where he's a young Black male in college, but then loses a friend of his to an injustice. His young friend was murdered while running outside, very similar to Ahmaud Arbery. So that story was influenced by Ahmaud's passing. So definitely writing was very therapeutic for me in that season. I was able to channel some of my own grief, some of the hard things I was dealing with, we were dealing with as a nation, as a culture, but also some fun things too, like the love relationships I was able to play with.
So I'm getting from you that there are some life events that happen that inspire you to write about different scenarios and different situations. I also recall that you mentioned that there's a faith-based aspect to who you are. And I have to imagine that some of that might find its way into the things that you're writing about. I've interviewed a couple of different playwrights. I interviewed Terrence Spivey about a month ago. And just a few weeks ago, I interviewed Ife Gale Young. And the similarities between both of them is that they write about the things that affect Black people, specifically Black people. When I think about your work, I'm thinking that perhaps you do a similar thing in that you can use your writing as a means of giving people information, gems that they can learn from. Is that part of your thought process as you're writing these books? I can write these stories and find a way to help people work through some of the situations that they deal with?
Yeah, I think the underlying message of all of my writing is going to be healing. I definitely think growth is another theme. I always want my characters to learn and grow. I always want them to overcome hard things. I always want them to evolve and become better versions of themselves. So definitely faith is a big catalyst for that, but it can look differently for each person and each character.
Okay, so that kind of is in alignment with the thought that, and I guess my artist activist hat is on right now, but I'm just thinking about the fact that arts and culture are a means of facilitating healing. And to hear you say that that's one of the objectives of your healing or your process is really, it's inspiring. You know, I'm mindful of the fact that in the past couple of years, we have been through some really traumatic stuff. I don't think it can be argued that everybody in this country has some type of relationship to post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm kind of distancing from the idea of it being post because it's like, well, it hasn't ended. So it's not after the fact, it's during the fact. And that further illustrates the necessity for those of us who are in the arts to continue to do the work that we do to facilitate healing. Do you see yourself as an active participant in facilitating healing for the masses that are going through this trauma that we're going through right now?
You know, it wasn't until you put it in those words that I saw it that way with urban stories. I think with my first two books, because they're nonfiction, it's pretty blatant that I'm, you know, an advocate for healing, and I want others to heal the way that I was able to heal from that breakup. With urban stories, like you said, we're still in it, right? So now as I'm talking about it, I can see like, wow, this really was an outlet for my grief. I definitely knew that while writing Tyrone's story off of the Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd deaths, or murders, I should say. However, it's not until now that I realized, like, yeah, this is definitely a vehicle for healing for other people, because you need those spaces to be honest. You need those spaces to go through the process of pain and anger and wanting vengeance in order, in my opinion, in order to get to that healing. We just can't stay there. If we stay there, then we're jaded and we're bitter and we're toxic. So I definitely think my art and my writing is hope-filled in that way. It will always definitely bring you to a place of hope and light and won't leave you in that place of pain.
Yeah, and two, I think it also, and you alluded to this earlier in our conversation, but it also provides you an opportunity for healing. The writing was cathartic for you as everyone was sitting down and in their self-imposed quarantines or government-imposed quarantines. You were being creative. You were writing about your experiences in a way that allowed you to get over that pain and also to help others. So I just want to drive the point home about the value of art in our society, because it is one of the ways that we connect with the creator. I don't think that you could disagree that, you know, your connection with writing was also your connection with God.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. And you sharing that, you know, reminds me of the very last story in Urban Stories is Nikki. And Nikki is a fictitious character depicted of me. So what I did was I tried to create a story that culminated a series of experiences I had around the time where there was a lot of trauma. One of those was the passing of my mom. And so what I did was, in a creative way, I put those events together. I tweaked some of them. It's not completely accurate, but it was really cool to kind of rehash all of that out. And even in some ways, it felt like I was reconnecting with my mom. So not even just connecting with my father, my Heavenly Father, or the Creator, but connecting with our ancestors and connecting with the eternals. And I think art and creativity are an amazing vehicle for that.
Yeah. And I want to piggyback on what you said and just talk about the connection that we have with the ancestors and the fact that they work through us. So it might be possible that you might have some Toni Morrison genetics or some Zora Neale Hurston genetics, or some kind of way you're being influenced by someone who has been here before. It's a beautiful thing that you're able to do what you're able to do. I have to tell you, Nicole, you're kind of like a hero to me. I would like to write some books too. I kind of been stuck on poetry and journalism and everything, but I got a few stories to tell too. I just got to figure out how to do that dialogue piece. That's the real challenge, writing the dialogue and pulling everything together. But I think you have an inside lane or an inside track to that process. And I also know that you are helping others work through the process of being authors and getting published. So we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about your new project. We're also going to talk about some of the things that you are doing to give a hand up to those who are needing a little assistance and getting motivated and learning how to be the author that you are. You are listening to Open Door on 95.9 FM WOVU. I'm Vince Robinson. My guest is Nicole Miller. She is an author. She is an activist. Now she's just learning about her activism. And she's a great person helping others be the writers that they want to be. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Sophie Absolutely. And I'm Love Lachey XO.
Hey guys, it's Chef Vic with Sauce the City.
Yo, what it do? It's your girl DJ Coco Z.
This your boy Lee Tron Twitty with My Smart Home Ohio.
What's good, y'all? This is Affinity with Spellbound Sounds.
Hey everyone, this is Purpose, CEO and founder of Stiletto Boss Women's Group. I love listening to WOVU 95.9 FM.
Welcome back to Open Door. Vince Robinson with author Nicole Miller, who has told us about 3 books that she has written, 2 nonfiction books, and then this third book, which is completely off the hook. I'm going to have to get it because I enjoy reading books that have been published by people that I know. So when I get some time, maybe when I'm on that airplane flying to the other side of the world, I can crack that book open and have it finished by the time I get to that destination, which hopefully will be at least 10 hours away. So I think that's probably enough time to read that book, or maybe I'll read half of it on the way there and half of it on the way back. Nicole, you have come out with another book. Tell us about this new project that you are bringing forth.
Sure, Vince. So my latest book is an ebook. It's called Self-Publishing 101, Everything You Need to Know from One Author to Another. And I'm really excited because this is my first step to helping other people become self-published authors. So up until this point, it's been me on my journey of self-publishing and being an indie author. But in this ebook, I give really important tips on what you need to know if you want to self-publish. And this is stuff that I had to learn going through the process. It's stuff that I kind of like bumped my head on, or even up until my third book didn't know and just recently learned with the publishing of my third book. So my heart is to just kind of give you a leg up, or those who want to publish their own books, a leg up, and they don't have to, fall into the pitfalls that I fell into.
Okay. I don't want you to give away all of the contents of the book, but it would be good if you could just share a few tips for those who need a little push to get them started.
Sure. One thing that you and I had talked about, even in our last interview, was just the importance of ownership and making sure that you're getting your profit. So often as indie authors, we might rely on the distributor to distribute our product and for people to go on other websites such as Amazon, purchase your book. But one of the keys that I give in this ebook, is making sure you have your own website and you are selling your product off of your website, because that's where you're going to get your profit. All you're going to get from a distributor are royalties, and it's so minimal compared to what you get when you buy in bulk, resell your product, and you get the profit.
Okay. And the notion of self-publishing, it has a stigma in some circles. I know in academic circles, you are either praised or criticized on your ability to get things published and your ability to rise through the ranks in terms of tenure and professorship. It's always contingent upon the things that you write. And when you write those things, you're quoting other people. So I guess you kind of boost yourself up by having this notion that somebody agrees with what I said, therefore it's valid. But could you talk a little bit about how we can erase the whole stigma of self-publishing and use it to our advantage?
Yeah, it's great for you to bring that up. I recently was on a workshop that Ursuline College hosted, and they talked about traditional publishing versus self-publishing. It does seem like that stigma is fading away, and I'll say that because right now we are at the height of the technological and information age, right? So back in the day, there were only these big traditionally publishing companies that we all wanted to go to. We felt like, and I felt this way myself, if we get picked up by them, then we're valid writers. But things are changing because now, as an indie author, I have all of these resources and information at my fingertips. Now I have access to a host of professional, qualified graphic designers and editors that I can work with. And I think in the past, indie authors and those who self-publish didn't have the availability of quality. And a lot of it was like, well, this is trash. This is poor quality. This is a horrible storyline. But now that we're working together and our mindsets are changing, that we're like, oh no, let's be the owners. Let's be the boss. Let's drive Ubers. Let's rent out our houses and get money off Airbnb. Like, our mindset is changing and we have access to these resources. It is different. And now a lot of the traditionally published companies want you to market your stuff. They want to know, how many followers do you have? How many people are in your email list? You know, all of that. So before you even can get signed with them, they want to know, are you worth the investment? Well, if they're going to do that, then why am I giving you a cut when I'm still having to build up my clientele? I'm still having to build up my audience. I'm still having to promote and market myself. So why not promote and market yourself and keep the profit?
Yes. Well, it's really a paradigm of exploitation. I mean, if you look at the record industry, you have the same situation. You have intellectual property, you have a distribution system, and you have folks who can make money based on your talent. That book, whether it's published by you or whether it's published by a publisher, it's still the same book. It still has the same content, but the difference between one or the other is that somebody else is making the lion's share of the money versus you making the lion's share of the money for the work that you have done, over such a long period of time. It just seems so unfair. You look at a platform like Amazon. I mean, Amazon might take 50, 60, maybe even 70%, versus you doing the homework and you putting in the effort to receive the fruits or the rewards of the work that you've put in. Back in the day, you had cats like Master P. They would record something, they put it on a cassette tape, they'd sell it out of the trunk of their car. It was hot. People wanted it. And when he put that cassette in somebody's hands, he got the $10 or the $15 or whatever it took to get paid on that. But when you hand it over to someone else and say, hey, you put that out and you let them be the middleman, then they're going to take off a huge chunk. I'm going to shift gears and you can answer candidly if you can. Have you done any investigation of NFTs and perhaps ways for you to benefit from these new technologies that are rolling out that folks are taking advantage of?
No, I haven't. So feel free to share your information.
Okay. Well, there's this thing called a non-fungible token, and it's based on the blockchain. It's based on the world of cryptocurrency, and many authors are turning to NFTs to maximize their ability to profit from their product. I'll give an example. I interviewed Anthony Rucker. He's also known as the Boogeyman. And I know you're young, Nicole, so back in the day, they had this show called Showtime at the Apollo. This is
you're insulting me.
Back in the 90s. I'm not insulting you because you're a beautiful young lady.
I am not that young.
And you're young. Okay. But back in the day, they had this show called Showtime at the Apollo. And Anthony was a poet here in Cleveland. He was part of a group called Black Poetic Society. The brother's very talented. He went to New York. He performed at the Apollo during amateur night, and he won 5 successive amateur nights at the Apollo. Now, for a poet to come on and do that that's just mind blowing, because usually it's somebody that comes on and can sing Jennifer Holiday and I Am Telling You I'm Not Going. You know, you go up against somebody that can blow everybody away with that, you've done something. But he won 5 times. He came back to Cleveland and decided that he needed to move to New York. He moved to New York and he got really successful there and ended up going out to the West Coast and working with Lionel Richie and all of that. But I said all that to say that I had a conversation with him and he told me that he's putting his next book of poetry out as an NFT. So with the NFT, what will happen is that people who buy the token or the coin will have an ownership interest in his book. So they will get royalties and he'll get royalties, but he can put it out in such a way that he only charges $5 for his book. But if he markets it properly, you can get 100,000 people to buy a $5 book and you just made a whole bunch of money. This is kind of where we're going. We got this whole notion of the metaverse and all that good stuff. So things are changing, and those might be some things that you want to investigate. You know, I'm really hopeful that the artist community can basically investigate this and get the benefit from it, because, you know, we've got this 4th industrial revolution going on. And right now we're seeing dramatic changes in the way that we do business. And either you are involved in it and aware of it and can take advantage of it, or you find yourself on the outside looking in. So just a word to the wise, don't sleep on NFTs, because folks are finding out about them and they are benefiting from them. So I know Nicole Miller, and I know she's going to do some investigation. And if there's any way for her to see her stuff as an NFT, making those millions of dollars, she's going to make it happen, because I also know that she's got a mind for numbers and she helps folks out with their taxes and whatnot. So she's got a head for figures and she's going to make it work.
Thanks for putting me out there, Vince. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right. This is a fascinating conversation. I'm glad we're able to do it the way that we're doing it right now. And the time is flying by. So we're going to have to come back after this quick break. You're listening to Open Door with Vince Robinson and my guest, Nicole Miller, who has just gotten just a little bit of information about NFTs. And I'm sure she is going to convert into action. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
You gotta listen, cause you gonna miss it. 95.9, those are the digits where you find good music, good conversation, good information. Number 1 station, taking over Cleveland, not just for the weekend. 24/7, day into the evening. We keep on feeding you, just keep eating solutions on the radio. That's what we be dealing. WOVU 95.9. Don't miss out, you better catch this vibe.
Welcome back to Open Door. Vince Robinson with author Nicole Miller. She's written 3 books and now she's got an ebook out. That's an example, Nicole, of how you've been able to leverage your ability to write into creating a product that requires no printing on your part, easily distributed, easily converted into profits, correct?
That's true. I did create the title page, the cover page, did some light editing. So this project was more of a hands-on where I did mostly everything.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your process. What works for you in terms of how you write? Some folks like to write first thing in the morning. Some folks might do it on the weekends. You've got this other business that you're involved in, which I'm imagining gives you a certain level of flexibility to determine what works best for you. So what works best for you?
It's true, and it may sound interesting, but the only way I can word it is I go off of my creative energy. So I definitely have to prioritize my bookkeeping business, and it's tax season. So administrative things always come first. That's, my bookkeeping clients. but, checking emails in the morning, meeting my Zoom, like doing my Zoom meetings, any other necessary meetings or engagements I have. And then I pencil in the writing around those things. But depending on where I am in the writing process, like right now I'm in the editing process for my novel, I'm not needing to create something out of nothing. So a lot of it is crafting, critiquing, cutting, adding. It's not like creating something out of nothing, like I said, and that's a different type of energy. So I go off of how I feel. I go off of early in the morning, which today was an early in the morning type of writing experience. And then I went into the administrative tasks and the bookkeeping and all of that. I'm sure I'll write again or work on my novel sometime later, but there's some other administrative things I need to do. I could be up till 2 a.m. I could be doing it for hours, but it fluctuates. I didn't write for about a month after I got my manuscript back from my editor, and I focused on some other things, and then I went back to it. So I kind of just go with how I feel internally, what is going to edify me, and what type of energy do I have to give to this project.
Okay. What's it like for you to hand your work off to someone to edit when you mentioned that you do editing? What's it like for you to turn it over to someone else to tweak or maybe change or, do something to that beautiful masterpiece that you gave them?
Well, you got to work with the right editors, and I'm grateful that I've had really good editors. I would say every editor needs an editor, just like every doctor needs a doctor, every teacher needs a teacher. So you can look at your own work all you want to, but you're just not going to see what someone else is going to see. You also want someone more experienced, and there's a couple of different types of editing. You can do a line editing where you're just dealing with punctuation and grammar, or you can do developmental editing, and that's what I'm in need of, where they're going to look at the whole storyline, analyze the characters, look at relationships. Does this make sense? Can the reader follow along? All that good stuff. So for me, the funny thing is, in both cases of my last two books, I was so sure that I was ready to publish when I handed my manuscripts off to the editors. And in both cases, it was like, you're not ready. And so it was good. That means I have good editors because they're able to show me areas that I still need to strengthen my work for it to be the best quality possible. So for me, it's been a great experience. I'm so grateful that I've had people that are more experienced than me or more experienced in this field, like with urban stories, and my novel is fiction, and who can help me grow. I'm all about feedback. I'm all about constructive criticism, and I'm all about growing in my craft.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that you can't have thick skin. You have to be willing to accept, criticism, because in most cases, it is constructive criticism. Sometimes the ego can get involved, and you can think, well, nobody could have written it better than I did. And then someone comes along, and then they do something with your words. I relate to that completely. I have a good friend. Her name was Margie Shaheed. May she rest in peace. She transitioned about 4 or 5 years ago. But we used to have these conversations, and, she talked about wordiness. And then one time I gave her something, and she gave it back to me. And I read the changes that she made, and it was like, wow. You really hooked this up, and that was a lesson to me. As good as we can feel about what we create, there is always a chance that it can be improved, and a good editor will do that for you. I really also appreciate the fact that you delineated the different types of editors, because we could see them as all in one lane when, you have different types of editors that do different things. So thank you for the education that you're giving me, my sister.
Well, you're welcome. And you bring up such a good point. It's vulnerable, right? If you're an artist, whatever it is that you're creating, like that's your heart, that's coming from your inner being, that's coming from your spirit. So it is a vulnerable experience to pass on your work. And even with my novel, I did get a little bit nervous, like, oh my God, what if she hated it? And so even last night, I was talking myself through some things, my own insecurities, but I got really good feedback overall. And I just had to hold on to that. I had to realize, like, it is good. I just want it to be great. And part of the reason I want it to be great is because I'm someone who values high quality and substance. And going back to the whole indie author view, thinking that maybe they're not as good, I want to dismantle that. I want people to say like, wow, like she kicked ass on that. Like she's an amazing writer. She did her thing and she did it on her own. So, and going back to your reference to Master P, I just want to say, because his story is one that I followed, and I highly admire that, because what he did was he positioned himself to be a competitor for those major record labels, and to be able to do something like that during his time, I just think is admirable. So.
Yes, absolutely. And there are others who have taken that to another level. I think Chance the Rapper is another person in that category. And the thing about Chance is that he was so successful as an independent that record labels wanted to come to him and bring them into their fold. But why would he want to do that? If
Exactly.
I'm doing okay right now, perhaps I don't need you. There are other artists, and I can't recall his name, but I know that he took a different approach. And what he decided to do was to not have his music on Spotify and those other music sharing platforms, but the way that he connects with his following is through text and email. So if he's going to do a concert, he'll just send out a text message blast. People can pay him directly. He's taking out the middleman, and he's much more successful as a result of that. I think that's probably something that all of us could learn from. The fact of the matter is, the greater your work, the greater your reward. And I think you could probably agree also that it is extremely important for you to surround yourself with folks that can get things done and act on your behalf in a way that's beneficial to you and them. So,
yes.
Yeah. So, you are working on a novel now that you have this ebook out and you're giving folks a hand and getting themselves up and running. Talk to us about this new novel that you're crafting.
Sure. So the storyline the genre is going to be young adult Black Christian fiction. And the storyline is depicting these two young women who are cousins, and they have some conflict between them. We're not really sure why, but there's beef there. But they live together because one lost her mom recently. Her mom passed away, while the other one actually lost her mom at a younger age. So this is definitely an outlet for me, as I'm still recovering from losing my own mother. But it was interesting to kind of view it through their lens because they're younger. So the one, and they couldn't be any more different. The one is, she's popping, she's into the nightlife, she's kicking it, she's doing her, she's got her booze. Whereas the other cousin, very reserved, strong Christian faith, she's academic, very serious. And it's really cool because the book is written from 2 points of view. So you kind of alternate between the two characters. And we're kind of seeing their relationship pan out in the sense that the one who's lively is the one with the beef against the more reserved one. So we're trying to figure out, like, okay, what's this beef rooted in? And then the other one is just trying to heal. She's come from a very tragic experience. She's just trying to heal. But her faith is such a strong catalyst that it is her love that she keeps demonstrating to her cousin, who keeps pushing her away, that helps to break down those walls in her cousin. So it's a coming of age, definitely spiritually based, and, has some love interests and romantic things happening there, and dealing with some hardships between parent-child relationships, as well as grief recovery.
So I'm curious, these stories, do they come about because you know people who are going through those scenarios, or are they just figments of your imagination?
The way that I write, and everyone has their own process. Some people, they start out with an outline, they brainstorm. I do none of that, Vince. I literally free write. So I definitely get inspired by real life experiences. This started out, I think I was inspired a guy I was dating had a really close female friend. And in this book, the main character has a really close male friend. And so it kind of I started out in seeing this close male-female friendship. But also I really struggled in some friendships that I had where I was acting out of my grief. And so I did project that through her character where she's doing the same thing. So I definitely think real life experiences inspire, but they don't necessarily, my writing isn't necessarily limited to that, but they can be a catalyst for my writing.
That's amazing. It's just amazing to me, first of all, that you could free write that way, you know, and end up with a book that's 350 pages long. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think the novel is probably a little longer.
Uh-oh. That must mean that you have a lot to say.
Yeah, my editor will probably chop some of it up, but as of now, it is 23 chapters and 103,000 words. So we'll see.
That's a lot of words, Nicole.
Yes, but it's very engaging. One of my best friends is a writer, and she's been a great listening ear, and she looks forward to our story times, is what she calls them. So I think we're on like chapter 15, and she loves it. So I'm like, okay, this is a good sign.
Okay. You know, something else that occurs to me in this moment is how, well, first of all, there's a great level of illiteracy in our country. You know, in this city, there are certain wards that they talk about the literacy rate being so low that folks can't go to the voting booth and read the ballot. So with an understanding of the literacy rate being what it is, what would inspire you to come out with a product that requires literacy?
Honestly, it's my experience. So I grew up reading. I have been an avid reader since I could read. And books for me, I mentioned this before, were a way to escape. They were a safe place. And honestly, they were my friends. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up. So books were always that place that I could run to and feel safe. And it was a shared passion that I had with my grandmother, who was my best friend and a huge influence growing up. And so it never once dawned on me that there were people that didn't have that experience. It was like, I need to share with the world what I've been given. And I've been given books. I've been given this love and creativity for reading. So I definitely never thought of people who couldn't read, except for my ancestors. I've definitely thought of that in context of slavery, in context of them not having this opportunity and feeling like I owed it to them to share this with the world, because there's just things that I'm walking in that they didn't get the opportunity to, that now they can through me.
Yeah. You know, the other thing is that we compete with electronic devices, you know, to actually hold a book in one's hand and take it in that way is not the norm these days, because we're always doing this, you know, or looking at a computer screen. Talk about how important it is to connect with reading with a book.
I think it's about how you interpret information. I won't limit people to saying you have to get a paperback. What I will say is I created Urban Stories for paperback and hardback. I did the hardback because for me, it just represented that chicken soup for the soul feeling, those good old-fashioned Hallmark movies. They just, you know, you want the hardback cover to give you that warm and cozy feeling. But I definitely think you can receive information different ways. Stories for the Urban Soul is also available on the Kindle version. You can download it on my website. And the really cool thing is I had a different cover made for that version because I wanted to attract more male readers. So the paperback and hardback copy of Urban Stories have more of a feminine graphics on them, but the ebook actually has more of a gender neutral city scene. So I definitely didn't want to exclude my male readers. But as far as how you receive information, that's up to you. But I definitely think ebooks are a necessity if you're an indie author. And I just told someone this today who I was helping with her publishing journey, but definitely you want to make that available in addition to your paperback, because we are always on the go, and it's not always easy to sit there and read a book, but you'll always have your phone usually.
Okay. Well, Nicole, this hour has flown by. One more time, tell them the web address that they can get in touch with you.
Yep, you can visit my website, NicoleDMiller.com.
Okay, NicoleDMiller.com, and you can connect with all the other social media platforms. It has been a joy to have this conversation with you. Unfortunately, our time has escaped us, but look forward to another conversation with you. Maybe when that next book comes out, we can do this again.
Thank you, Vince. I appreciate it.
All right. And thank you for joining us. This is Open Door with Vince Robinson on 95.9 FM. Know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your absolute best day.